Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of LíR Confidential on LíRmedia.tv. And I'm absolutely delighted. On the centenary very soon of Kevin Barry, we have the author and his grandniece, Siofra O'Donovan, and her new book is just out. And I have picked up my copy there, and I hadn't it all read yet, but please don't quiz me on it. Siofra, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Pat.
Delighted to have you. Now, I heard you recently on the radio, of course, as well, on another channel, defending her letter that was written into the Irish Times at that time by some fellow who didn't know his proverbial from his elbow. But anyway, we won't mention him or the program. But
yeah.
You wanted to read, did you want to read something before we get started?
Yeah, I want to bring Kevin to life as a young man who was in college and give a picture of Dublin how it was 100 years ago, because
Excellent.
I tell you, it was much more fun then than it is now. So we have somebody who was in college with Kevin Barry was Todd Andrews, who's Ryan Tubridy's grandfather. And his grandfather and my grandfather were great buddies, both in the IRA. So Todd Andrews, Frank Flood, Kevin Barry were a few who were together in UCD all at the same time. UCD was bursting in the seams after World War I, bursting at the seams, I should say. Todd Andrews said in his book, Dublin Made Me, I didn't know Kevin so well because he was a rugby player and a Jesuit boy. I knew he was one of us, although this fact in no way helped to foster our acquaintance. There are a number of students who were known to be IRA men, but unless they were in the same battalion or company, they never spoke nor associated with one another. And there was also an element of snobbery there as well. You know, Todd Andrews talks about the Literary and Historical Society in UCD and how a lot of them would have absolutely no time for anybody who had anything to do with the IRA.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I can just read you that bit. That's actually very interesting. So no, that's not the right bit. Anyway, I won't. Oh yeah, yeah. He said that it was run by the Literary and Historical Society in UCD. He said was run by the sons of Castle Catholics and the detritus of the Irish Party, as in the Home Rulers, a mere training ground for lawyers and careerists waiting for the coming of Home Rule, who regard the IRA as gun bullies and even murderers. And that attitude, as we know, as we have seen recently, still exists to this day. All of that reared its head when there was the massive commemoration in 2001 and the reinterment and the exhumation of the bodies. People who don't seem to be able to understand nor to see that men like Kevin Barry, they didn't go out cold-blooded murdering British soldiers. No. They were part of a legitimate army that was democratically mandated by double error.
It was a war between one army and another.
Yeah. Yes, and it was a democratically elected parliament, Dáil Éireann, that mandated that army, and they were completely 100% accountable to them. So we're not talking about terrorists here.
No.
Now there was somebody else in the college at that time who would become Kevin Barry's brother-in-law, but unfortunately they never met. This was Jim O'Donovan, who was my grandfather, who was very extreme in his activities after the war.
Jim O'Donovan was your granddad?
Yeah.
Ah, yeah. I'm just fitting in my head now,
Yeah. So by this time, he was actually, when Kevin was in UCD, my granddad was actually director of chemicals of the IRA GHQ, and you can see a big portrait of him with all the other IRA GHQ. It's in Collins Barracks, a huge portrait by Leo Ryan, and he's in the corner, and he always looks very sort of stern and severe. My granddad, I was always a bit scared of him, but I was young enough when he passed away as well. He also blew his fingers off in a grenade.
And Siofra, did you get a chance whilst he was around to talk to him about Kevin?
No, he died when I was 7.
All right.
I don't think he was in the slightest bit interested in me as his grandchild, to be honest. He just was who he was. He was quite a reserved man, and my own father would have had a difficult relationship with him. But he married my Kevin Barry's younger sister, Monty Barry, who was too young really to understand what was happening with her own brother when he was executed. But anyway, she went on to marry Jim O'Donovan.
Yes.
So another person who was at UCD was Jerry McAleer, and he was Kevin Barry's best friend from Belvedere. He himself did not know about Kevin's IRA activities. And he also didn't know that Kevin loved drinking because he himself did not drink. Kevin was an avid dancer and a keen drinker. So Jerry McAleer said about Kevin, now they were very close friends, so it is incredible how Kevin could compartmentalize his life. He said Kevin and Charlie O'Neill, a close mutual friend, were great dancing people. I never bothered my head going to dances, but Kevin and Charlie and one or two others had nights out in those low down dance halls. If they drank, it was damn little or nil. So Kevin's dancing just took off in the dance halls of Dublin. And there was another student at UCD called Honoria Orkney. She met Kevin at a Cayley and they were dancing to the Siege of Venice. Now, I got this story from my father. My father, Donald O'Donovan, wrote a book called Kevin Barry in His Time. That was published in 1989. And he was drawing from his own father's book, Jim O'Donovan, my grandfather. And he had written an unpublished biography of Kevin Barry in the 50s, which I still haven't found. It's lost in time. So anyway, Honoré and Kevin were at a Cayley dancing to the Siege of Venice, a dance which you change partners in that kind of a dance. And Kevin said, I didn't know the Carlow girls knew anything about dancing. And she answered him, I didn't know rugby players knew anything about it either. It was all great fun, you know, in those days. Dublin is no more fun. Everything's all shut down. So the Matassa Coffee House on Marlsborough Street had a very large IRA clientele, including Frank Flood. And Frank Flood would have had his last cup of coffee in Matassa's Coffee House on Marlsborough Street. He was part of an ambush in 1921, I think it was March. And he was then arrested and court-martialed and executed by John Ellis, the same executioner as that of Kevin Barry in Mountjoy Prison. So after the raid on the King's Inns on the 1st of June 1920, anyway, Kevin was part of this raid on the 1st of June in the King's Inns. It was very well planned. It came off in 5 minutes. There was nobody injured, nobody shot. And that was the same intention that they had for the ambush on the 20th of September in the Merck's Bakery. Captain James Kavanagh of the H Company, he had no intention of a shootout. No. You know, that's not what they were there for. They were just trying to get the arms and get on.
While the truck was it Bolton Street? Was it?
It was near there. Yeah. It was Church Street and North King Street.
Yes, they were after the arms, which is what they were after, really, you know. But
well, because they had a massive shortage of arms, you see, so they had to operate in a very different way, obviously, to a normal army. Yes. They had to use guerrilla warfare. They had to use surprise tactics. Otherwise, they couldn't have done it. Now, another cafe in Dublin that was very popular, Todd Andrews used to frequent it, was called Robert's Cafe on Grafton Street. And he talks about having 2 rolls of butter in a bun or baked beans on toast. Robert's became a sort of a club for us, and we all got to know the waitresses very well. And they used to meet at the Grafton Picture House. Everybody loved going there. So I'll just read you a little letter to give you an idea of Kevin and his voice and what his humour was. And he's writing to his friend Bapty Marr. Bapty Marr lived in Athy, County Kildare, went on to marry Kevin's sister Shell later. So this is to Bapty. It's around, I'd say, summer 1920. No, it's probably early September 1920. How the devil are you at all? You might write to a fellow once in a while. I wouldn't mind me not writing because I'm very busy. Pictures, National Library, Grafton 5 to 6 p.m. But a fellow like you, a bloody gentleman of leisure, you know it's unforgivable. By the way, that bloody bastard never came with the suit, with the result that I have to borrow one for the dance tomorrow night. Write and tell him that I say he's a right old so-and-so. And when will you be up to town? You ought to come for a Cayley in the College of Science on the 30th of January. Yours till hell freezes, Kevin. So that's where I got the title for the book.
Oh, I see.
A way of writing letters. And he wrote letters right up to, you know, the night of his execution.
And that was one of the phrases he used, was a common phrase of his, till hell freezes.
It was, yeah. That's in quite a few of the letters. And then when he was actually in Mountjoy, he would write, humorously at times, he would write, yours till I go over the top, which was, of course, what they used to say about the poor lads in the trenches in World War I.
Right, absolutely. Of course, there's coming to the First World War. A lot of people were home from that,
Yeah,
destroyed, damaged, and whatever. You know,
yeah, decimated.
yes,
Yeah.
right. Sure, Tom Barry himself, who he fought in the British Army in the Middle East.
Oh, did he?
He did. Yeah, Tom Barry was an officer, or a sergeant in the British Army in Aden and what we call modern day Iraq. He fought with them. That's how he was
Oh, I
so
see.
successful, because he knew the tactics of the British, the military tactics. You see, Tom himself. But anyway, we'll get.
Well, they were discussing that all heavily. Churchill was discovering all that heavily in the cabinet about Mesopotamia, which Iraq was known as Mesopotamia then. And he authorized the use of tear gas at the time as well.
Yes.
And he's the one who then pushed for the Black and Tans and the auxiliaries in Ireland.
Oh,
Those
absolutely.
were his terror tactics.
Absolutely, yeah. Because Cork, my own county, where I'm from, Cork, it was the killing fields in 1920 in the War of Independence. But Tom Barry, that's why he was successful, because he knew how they how they operated. That's the military as well. He knew the tactics, so that's
Yeah.
why he was so successful against them.
He was a brilliant strategist, wasn't he, Tom
Right,
Barr?
yeah. But getting back to Kevin, then he was. Uh, I suppose I know it's a cliche, but he really did love life, living life every day.
Yeah, he absolutely did. He had so many areas to his life. He loved racing, like he loved betting. He'd tell all the guards in Mountjoy, which horse to bet on. He loved girls. You can see it from his letters. Oh, I met a Belgian girl in Glentalough in the hotel.
Right.
He many good friendships with women as well. He was extremely, obviously, very sociable, very charismatic. Um, he was a good student as well, apart from the fact that he failed his medical exams in the first time. But he was meant to do the resits on the 20th of September 1920. Of course, that was supposed to be at 2 o'clock, and he, of course, never made it
Yes.
out of the ambush.
Yeah. And what about his background? Was his mum and dad, were they comfortable, or were they well off?
Yeah, they were strong farmers in County Carlow, and they had a good amount, about 200, 300 acres. So they would have come through the famine fairly unscathed. They then, by 1879 or 1881, Tom Barry, Kevin's father, was looking to Dublin to develop a dairy business up there.
Right.
So he and his sister, Judith Barry, she was unmarried, but she's a very strong woman. And a lot of the Barrys and the Dowling women in Kevin's line were strong, strong women. Judith Barry, she went up to Dublin, and she ascertained that a house on Fleet Street with a dairy shop, 8 Fleet Street, would be suitable, and a dairy yard in Pimlico. So they bought both. And James Connolly actually lived very near them in Pimlico as well. So they were well-to-do, and there was enough money then for Kevin to go to Belvedere College, which turned him into this kind of, I suppose, in his afterlife, he was this sort of Jesuit boy,
Yeah, because all the early photographs of Kevin that people will be familiar with were taken with him, were with the Belvedere jersey on him.
Exactly, like well, here he is in Belvedere.
Yes.
This photograph was actually belongs to, this is a copy of a photograph that belongs to Gerard McAleer's daughter Ivana. But this picture here, this was Kevin here. This is him. This is the blown up bit of him in the corner.
I see.
Yeah, so that's the rugby team, 1917, I think.
Yes.
So the Belvedere was quite a rugby school, and Kevin was pretty keen on rugby. So that put him into different categories. So when he first joined in 1917, the Volunteers, they were laughing at him, going, "Look at this Belvedere boy with the cap on his head."
Yeah.
You can't take him seriously. But he pretty quickly was made NCO officer, and then mobilization, and then, didn't take that long.
Yeah.
We'd take him seriously,
And his own family, Siofra, his mum and dad, would you describe them as Republicans?
Not his father. Tom Barry, his father actually died in 1908, and Kevin was only 6 years old. So you can imagine that had a significant effect on him. Now, there were women in the family who were the housekeeper on Fleet Street, Kate Kinsella, was a very sympathetic Republican after the 1916 rioting and the executions, which turned the tide for a lot of people, turned public opinion.
It did.
Even though she had, I think, her father or somebody involved in the Invincibles and the Phoenix Park murders, she was against violence because of that. But after the executions in 1916, she felt something was very wrong. And so she had a lot of ballads and stories that she would have told to Kevin and the children, all the Barry children, you know, as they were growing up. Now you have to remember Carlow. Kevin was from Carlow, Hackettstown. This is over the border with Wicklow. So we have a lot of stories down there about Michael Dwyer and the 1798 rebellion. Kevin would have had somebody in his lineage, a Hutchinson, a few generations back, who had fought in the Battle of Hackettstown.
Go away.
Yeah, he did, and 1798. So these stories were, you know, very much within Kevin. Now, I don't know if Tom Barry himself had Republican sympathies. I never heard so, but his mother certainly had her strong sympathies as time went on. And when Kevin Barry was in the O'Connell schools in Dublin, he bought tickets for a commemoration of the Manchester martyrs, who were also hanged, you know.
That's right.
Like Kevin, you know,
there's a famous song about them, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's this song about them.
The gallows tree, swung the noble hearted tree, and all of that, yeah.
Exactly. So you can see the thread of similarity there, high upon the gallows tree, how that comes through. And he and his elder sister Kitby went to the Manchester martyrs, and there were all sorts. The commemoration, it was on Mansion House in Dublin. And that was in 1915. So Kevin was only 13. And after that, he said he was a Republican. And he said, I want to join Fianna Éire. And his mother wouldn't let him. But it was only 2 years later that he actually did join the company.
Yes.
And imagine.
So obviously the influence of, well, he obviously be influenced with who he hung around with as well. His closest friends, were they in the movement with him?
Well, as Jerry McAleer, his best friend in Belvedere, was not in the IRA and did not know that he was in the IRA. In fact, he did not know that Kevin shot a British soldier until 1989, 1988, when my father interviewed him. And my father said, but this is the case. He actually did. And Jerry McAleer was actually shocked. So.
Oh, dear God, yeah.
Now, other good friend, Kevin.
The British Empire, with all its influence and power, continuously made the same mistakes wherever they were. As you said, when they hung the people, executed the 1916 leaders, that completely turned many people to their cause. Anyway, what you're saying, Siofra, yeah?
Well, absolutely, it did, because they were using tactics that were even more oppressive. And it got increasingly more oppressive and increasingly more severe, and increasing terror tactics, and the sacking of Balbriggan and everything.
Well, that was horrific. The sacking of Balbriggan.
Burning Cork, you know.
Well, the sacking of Balbriggan was a shocking incident, and they burned down the only factory that employed probably all the people around Balbriggan.
Yeah.
And put the whole village at the time or town into penury, which was shocking.
Appalling. And that was a reprisal for the shooting of an RIC officer. So their counter tactics were very severe and disproportionate.
Yes.
So that would have turned more people progressively. And Kevin knew very well that by being executed, he would further the cause, and he did. He knew he did. He said to Kitby, his sister, when she came in to see him the first time, she was an Albert Marshall after the sentence was issued and everything. He said, mind, there's to be no reprieve. He wanted no reprieve. He didn't want an escape plan either. But the IRA did keep trying, and Michael Collins was trying as well.
Yeah, they were.
It's hard for us to understand now, but he wanted that, and the family actually wanted that too. You know, he was to go to the gallows. It was absolutely tragic, and doesn't mean at all that they didn't grieve horribly, you know, for the loss of their brother, their son, whatever, you know. But
the first serious brave act of defiance to the Crown, for the want of a better description, from Kevin was the very first few minutes when he stood up in court and steadfastly said, "I do not recognise this court."
Yes.
They were flummoxed. They were flummoxed anyway.
They were, because that's how you disarm them in a way.
Yeah.
You know, he holds up his newspapers in front of him, and he said, "I have nothing to say. I don't recognise this court. I don't want representation." So Sean O'Hui, his solicitor, had to officially step down. You know, but he did a clever thing, the solicitor. He said, but the president of the court-martial must read this document, which was the testimony of his torture, which was later, a few days after his execution, it was printed in the papers, and then it was, you see, in those days, the torture wasn't actually that severe, but it was considered to be in those days.
It was, of course, yeah, it was, yeah. I was just leafing through your book, and the fact that he had only someone assigned to his case that very morning who hadn't even met Kevin.
Yeah, I know, but no, but he had met Sean O'Hui before, but he had said, "I don't want to be represented," you see. So Sean O'Hui had to officially state then that he was not going to be representing Kevin Barry, but that he would remain for the hearing.
Right, right. And you have some of Kevin's personal belongings, Siofra.
Well, not exactly. Now, we used to have his walking stick, not his walking stick, but his shillelagh, which he made himself from blackthorn, and was, you know, a typical Wicklow thing. They used to have those matches with them.
That's right.
But I didn't know where that walking stick went, and then I was in the National Museum being shown a few things to do with Kevin Barry, and I saw the walking stick or the shillelagh, and I said, "Well, how did that get here?" Because as far as I remembered, this was a thing kept in the umbrella stand at home. I didn't know it was Kevin Barry's shillelagh, but Dad just had it kept in the umbrella stand.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, amazing.
Yeah. So then there is this medallion of Kevin Barry in profile. This few people in the extended family have a copy of this, but I don't know who the artist is, and it's just
quite beautiful.
Nice. In profile. And then behind me there is a portrait of Kevin Barry, which my father gave me, and that was painted by somebody in the
H. And Siofra, just as you're talking about that, is there any commemorative centenary medal or anything being
no. COVID is the excuse for everything. There's just pre-recorded events. There's a pre-recorded UCD event, and I did that today with my cousin Ewan O'Halpin and Professor Mary Daly, and we had a very good discussion all about.
And when is that going out?
That I will send it to you. It is going out in the next couple of days. So that's happening. And then Dublin decided to do very little, except another pre-recorded event. And then Carlow, they really handed it all over to Carlow Museum and Library. So John Shortall organised for pre-recorded interviews and discussions about Kevin Barry with me and a few people.
Yeah.
And that's all they're doing. There's nothing really for 100 years. Now, we were going to in Rathvilly, I'm on the Rathvilly Commemoration Committee, and not that I've been the most active person by any means. The Barrys and many people down there have been incredible in how they fundraised, how they got an artist and commissioned him to make a full life-size bronze statue of Kevin Barry. Now, that was supposed to be unveiled on the 1st of November, and we cannot do that now.
Why?
Because we feel we need to have a ceremony for it, and you can't have anybody attend. So again,
that's completely bonkers, but anyway.
Well, I would entirely agree, but that's the decision that the committee had to make under the present circumstances.
I know, and that statue will be in Rathvilly.
Yes, it will, and that will be a wonderful event. It will happen, and it will happen next year. We don't know whether it would be January. His birthday is 20th of January. We don't know whether it would be later, but it is definitely going to happen. The statue is actually already there, and it's absolutely wonderful. It's a full life-size bronze statue of Kevin Barry standing, and it will be there forever. You know, we're going through all these, ups and downs and confusion over the times we live in, but really it's there for posterity. So the future generations will look and say, well, there's Kevin Barry. Now, there is a memorial statue or memorial to him not a figure of him. That was unveiled in 1958, and Thomas Clark's wife was there, and all the Barrys, obviously, and I'm not sure if De Valera was there. Probably not, actually, but it was a big event back in the day.
In 1958, yes.
1958, yeah.
Now,
That's,
my special guest, LíR Confidential is a program here on LíR Media. My special guest is Siofra O'Donovan, and we're discussing Kevin Barry running up to the centenary. And don't forget, viewers and listeners, to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you just press the button. It's as simple as that on the right hand side, and there you go, and we'll do all the rest for you. You could catch up on all our programs. Now, getting back, Siofra, to the book, how long was it, how long were you thinking about this book?
Oh, that's a long story. I go back to when I was 11 years old, and my father, who was a journalist and a writer, Donald O'Donovan, he turned around to me at 11. Now, he was always talking about Kevin Barry, but to be honest, when I was going into my teenage years, I didn't want to know. You know, no. you just whatever. Anyway, I was 11 years old, and he said to me, what book am I going to write next? He'd written a book about Irish-American businessmen, dreamers of dreams, and Tony O'Reilly and all the, Anheuser-Busch, all those. And he'd got a great time in America. But I said to him, you're going to write a book about Kevin Barry? He said, right, he said. And it was the right thing to do. And so he set off on his journey of research and interviewing and everything. And he got a little caravan from his brother Jerry, and he stayed in a field near Tombay, and he did his research and his interviews, and he was with the Barrys and everything. Anyway, years passed, and by 2001, I still really hadn't regained any great interest in Kevin Barry. I was, there's a lot of history in our family, so it really is a lot to carry. So it used to make me just go, oh, not again.
No.
Dad's library would be lined with books about nationalism and Ireland and history, and I would just go, oh, I've had enough. I went off to India, and I lived with Tibetan people, and I studied Tibetan language, and I became...
How long were you in Tibet?
I wasn't in Tibet now. I was in Tibetan settlements in India.
Oh, in India, right.
Yeah. And so I had a completely different kind of a life.
Is that one of those journeys that we all are encouraged to take to find ourselves, is it?
No, I went out there. I was asked by a Tibetan Lama to go and study to be a translator. So I had a very specific purpose in going. And then learning the language, I then decided that I would research a book and write a book about Tibetans living in exile in India. So I published that. It's called Pema and the Yak, and it's published by Pilgrim's Books, but it's now published as an ebook.
Pema and the Yak, for all people looking into this, don't forget, look up that yourself.
Well, it's now republished as Lost in Shambhala, and that's published under Amazon Kindle. And it's very cheap, actually, as an ebook. So it's a good read. It's very interesting. So I suppose in a way, it did echo something similar, an interest in people who'd been occupied and who are still occupied and who still have a very severe and difficult situation under Chinese occupation.
They have. It's one of the forgotten, one of the many forgotten problems in this planet we're populating today. That whole area of Tibet, this whole area up there,
It's appalling.
And India, to you, Siofra, some of my friends, close friends, two very close friends of mine, were there for periods of time in their lives, and they fell totally in love with the country. Mm. Would that be a case for you as well?
Absolutely. I think about it every single day. I would usually have gone to India in the winter for a month or two.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen, obviously, this year. So India is definitely my spiritual home. I absolutely love it. I love the Himalayas. I love Goa. I love the beaches. I love Tibetan people. I love it. It's just...
And is it as overpopulated as we see in films and documentaries?
Absolutely.
And how would that, that would shock me now. I haven't been there. That would shock me, where you could hardly put out your hands and you walk around the streets. You're packed with people. How did you find that, adjusting to that?
The very first time I went to India in 1997, I took a bus from Delhi up to Dharamsala, where the Dalai Lama lives in this big community in exile, living there. Mm. And it was the day I woke up the next day. I didn't know. I was so culture shocked. Anyway, it was the Buddha's birth, death, and enlightenment. It's called Parinirvana. Mm-hmm. And then the monks all brought me up the hill, the temple hill, to go to the Dalai Lama's temple. And then I was walking up, and the whole road was lined with beggars. And it was like something out of Dickens, or, you wouldn't even see it in 19th century London. You know what I mean? You just wouldn't, you can't get your head. Little children with matted hair and men with one eye, with one leg. It was like a fable of poverty. I couldn't even manage it. I didn't know who to give money to. There were so many, because they were there, you see, from all over, because they knew it was a special day, and they knew the Tibetans, the people.
They knew there'd be many visitors. Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah. But interestingly, then, coming back to independence and our War of Independence, that had significant influence on Indian independence movement. Terence McSweeney's Principles of Freedom, that hugely influenced Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, and also influenced a guy called Chandra Chat Bose, who was from Bengal. And he was a very strong nationalist as well. He had the hunger striking method was taken up by a few Indian prisoners.
Yeah.
So some of the methodologies were used as well. But of course, Gandhi was non-violent. His method was ahimsa, which means non-violence. But there were those who did use violence as well.
Well, Terence McSweeney was a huge influence on that event, like many events of his being Lord Mayor of Cork and being 74 days on hunger strike, that made international headlines.
Oh, it absolutely did.
And it had a tremendous influence. And I heard a few interviews with his wife, Terry McSweeney, and I tell her she was an incredible woman in her own right, an incredible person. But we're getting off the beaten track here. But
well, that Indian nationalist I just talked to you about, he went and wanted to do a bit of publicizing for Indian republicanism, and he landed up in Cove, and he went straight to the McSweeney family. That was his first. No, he did. He absolutely did. There were numerous friendships between Indians and Irish people at a very high level. William Butler Yeats was very good friends with Rabindranath Tagore, India's most famous poet and composer. Rabindranath Tagore, Rabindra Sangeet Tagore. They were very good friends, and he was sort of discovered, this Tagore, he was discovered in London. He was extraordinary looking with a long beard and huge brown eyes. And Yeats got him well known, in London circles. Absolutely. So, and De Valera was good friends, I think. Well, he was interested anyway in Gandhi, and
De Valera was
Indian friends, yeah.
Yeah, that must have been an eye opener for poor Gandhi. But anyway, LíR Confidential is a program here with my special guest Siofra O'Donovan on LíRmedia.tv, and our email for information is info@LíRmedia.tv if you want to make any comments on this program. And subscribe, press our red button, subscribe to us. We're trying to get the numbers up. Now, you wrote a novel called Malinsky.
That's right.
What was that about?
That was about two brothers separated during the Nazi occupation of Poland. And one brother ended up coming to Ireland with his mother. And the other brother, Stanislav, stayed in Krakow with his mad aunt. And after 50 years, they meet again. So that's a story of separation and diaspora and exile, and then some kind of reunion. But I lived in Krakow. After college, I moved to Krakow, and I lived and worked in the English schools and university. I was acting and all sorts of things. I was absolutely fascinated by World War II.
Oh, yeah. And that story, would that be based on real events?
It again involved a massive amount of research and pulling all my father's book about the Third Reich down off the shelves and going through all of them, and interviewing war veterans in Poland and people who were in Ireland who had come into exile from Poland during and after the war, those who were fleeing either the regime or they were fleeing the communist regime later on. It was again like a hard story of war and separation.
And did you get a chance to visit any of the camps?
I did, yeah. I went several times to to Auschwitz, Birkenau, which is the other camp beside Auschwitz.
First time, Siofra, you went to Auschwitz.
Sorry?
The first time you went to Auschwitz, walking in those gates that have gone down in infamy, what was the feeling like for you?
Well, do you know that the first time I went, it was very early after the fall of communism. I'd say 94.
Right.
I walked in. Maybe it was 95 by the time I got to Krakow, and I was actually walking in through those gates. Decided I need to do this. I was on my own.
All right.
And I went in and I sat down and watched the little film, which was a little bit full of Polish propaganda, but anyway, it hadn't been changed. It was a bit from the Russian side, as opposed,
at that time,
camp, from the Nazis and all that. Anyway,
yeah.
And then you walk into these rooms with masses of shoes of the victims, or masses of glasses, spectacles. It's really very jarring. And then I walked into the crematorium, and that was absolutely chilling. It was, and now you see, nowadays, you probably it won't have such an effect. It may and it may not, but there's an awful lot of tourists. Well, maybe not at the moment, but there's a lot of, it's one of the biggest things to do in Krakow now is to take your bus out to Auschwitz. Back then, when I went first, nobody was going, really.
Yeah.
It wasn't the thing to do.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's the thing to do, but it was absolutely shocking. Now, I later went again with my sister and her friend.
Yeah.
And I remember the three of us going in there. We all felt sick and we had a row. It was really strange. We felt off, very off. And we also went to the crematorium. We saw everything. We just wanted to go. And then as soon as we left, we were fine. And the last time I was there was with my father, and we'd done some business together in Krakow in 2005. And he said, right now, he says, we have a few days. What will we do? And I said, I don't know, you say, because, you may not be back that quickly. I mean, I come frequently. And he said, well, we'll go to Auschwitz. It's like, oh, here we go. So I took my father on the train out to Auschwitz, but I hadn't been there in so long that I didn't realize that there was actually a shuttle bus from the train station up to the camp. So it was snowing and my poor father had to walk with me all the way up to the camp. And by the time he was diabetic, so by the time he got there,
all right,
yards, he said, I'm bloody starving, he said. So that's very ironic, isn't it?
Yes.
So we had to go into the canteen in Auschwitz and give Dad pancakes.
Yes, because of his sugar, yeah. Now, that, to me, of course, we didn't, I went to school in the late 50s, early 60s, national school it is. We didn't hear a whole lot about that part of our history, that part of the Second World War,
No, that's because we were neutral and
our history finished at 1916 anyway, when I was going to school.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I heard nothing about the Civil War, the War of Independence. But because I was from County Cork, North Cork, and because of where I grew up, I was well aware of the characters and the people, the historical figures involved in the whole thing. But only for that, we weren't taught it, because you must remember an awful lot of people, some teachers, had a connection with the Civil War who were teaching history.
Yeah.
So you had that closeness. So as we got further away, then I dare say, it should be much better today, but I don't know how history is taught today myself. I've no idea.
Well, I think it's interesting because I'm looking at my son's junior cert history book, and there's no mention of Kevin Barry, and there's much more about Michael Collins. So Kevin Barry is having a bit of a rough time at the moment.
Michael Collins. I suppose because of the political situation in this country, where we had the domination of two parties in our social fabric of this country, it's taken 100 years for it to break up that. But because of that, I think history has suffered.
Absolutely.
That's my reading of it,
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm well aware of the story of Michael Collins, but as I said, I'm well aware of Tom Barry, and I'm well aware of Dan Breen and all of those, because of where I lived. It's no fault of what I was taught in school, But as you said, in your son's history books, you said,
no,
are they being taught history in secondary school?
Yeah, well, they are. Yeah, yeah. He has to do quite a few history projects and stuff.
And what are they like? What are they like, Siofra? What are they covering like? Would you know offhand?
Well, he's been doing, early archaeology and a bit of Neolithic and ancient Irish history, and then the background, use the tools that they use to just excavate sites and that kind of thing. So he's been. He hasn't gotten up to World War II. He hasn't gotten up to much about Irish history yet.
Yeah. All we had going to school were all the battles. We'd learn off all the battles of this and the battle of that, the battle of the Boyne, the battle of this and the battle of that, the battle of
Yeah.
Kinsale, flight of the Earls, and all of that.
Yeah, you see, all of that seems to have gone from the curriculum, the
Yeah,
Irish history curriculum for the junior cert, and I think it's gone for the leaving cert as well. I
yeah,
remember doing that meticulously, and we had to draw little pictures of
yes.
these things and everything. It was a marvelous way to remember. I always loved history, and I loved my history notebooks and everything, and I loved the story of the flight of the Earls. But all of that, Hugh O'Donnell, all of that gone. They don't know anything about that. They don't also know anything about Irish mythology.
No, because it's down to the teacher.
Oh, it absolutely is. Yeah, I mean, I've taught history in school. I've taught English and history at
Yeah,
second level, but I just found the curriculum was very limited, and it wasn't really, there wasn't much scope for creativity. It was really all about the junior cert and the leaving cert. So I teach, actually, what I do is I teach creative writing workshops in prisons and schools, and I go in independently. That's the way I like to teach.
but you just phone up the governor. Hi, governor, here I am. Can I come down next week? Is it?
No, it's not. Never.
Right.
That's very hard to get into prison. You wouldn't believe it, but
Really?
how hard it is to get
Well,
into prison.
well, it is easy to get into prison. Now, let's be fair.
Yeah, well,
I know what you mean.
that way, let's say.
Yeah.
But no, I'm on the Writers in Prisons panel, which is supported by the Arts Council of Ireland. So on that, you're then requested by different prisons to go in and give workshops, writing workshops. So I've been into Portlaoise every year, sometimes twice a year, giving sometimes 6-week series of workshops. I'd love to do more. It's actually the most rewarding work, teaching work I've ever done, is working in prison.
Yeah.
And love working Mountjoy.
I know I had a very good, the third last warden, I won't mention his name, he passed away, he died of cancer, but I had a very good relationship with him, and because we were involved in Toastmasters together, and I floated the idea of doing a regular radio program from the prison on a one night a week,
Yeah.
to speak to everybody in there. He was up for it, all right. Definitely he was the governor, rather, I should say, not the warden, the governor of the prison. He was up for it, but he said it'll probably take a long time. You have to, he hadn't autonomy. I thought he had autonomy as the governor of the prison.
No, it's very complex to get things off the ground in prison. It takes
it is
a lot of loopholes, and there's a lot of paperwork. It's not easy. I mean, for me to get one publicity shot outside the gates of Mountjoy took well over 17 hours to get the go-ahead, to go in through one gate. Yeah.
Really? Gee. And I got shown around, not around Limerick. That's not true. I didn't get shown around Limerick prison. I got in to the governor's office, all right, just to talk to him. But that was it. This huge red tape. I suppose you can see behind it the reasoning, but nevertheless, how did you get on then? What kind of people did you meet, Siofra, in prison? What kind of, was it on a male prison you were in, or female?
It was male. It was Portlaoise prison that I worked in, and
that was full of an awful lot of political, what they call political.
I was working a lot with the political prisoners, and I will be doing that again.
Yeah. Were these people lifers, as they say?
I can't really speak about that. I'm not really allowed to, but I also I never asked, because I'd rather just meet people in the present moment and not make any judgment.
Right.
There were a few notorious prisoners there, and if I said their names, you'd know them, but I'm not really supposed to say.
No, I could guess them, but I know who we'll both be talking about, That's because I was in the Irish Army from 69 to 73, so we escorted a few prisoners, so to speak.
Oh yes, yeah, sure.
It was like so. But anyway,
They're very, very, very educated, very motivated, and very inspiring to work with. And I teach through a what I call the hero's journey. It was developed by Joseph Campbell, was a mythologist, but he said he wrote a lot about this. He was a brilliant mythologist, but he developed a way of analyzing all stories, a sort of a universal blueprint for all stories and myths across the world. So the hero's journey is actually a template which can be used to write screenplays or anything. It is used in Hollywood to write screenplays. So it's a very powerful archetypal journey. So if you get, what I do is I teach 8 or 12-week courses and get people to write that journey. It's very powerful as a self-reflective tool. It's very powerful for also bringing amazing stories into the world as well.
And you're speaking there, Siofra, about mythology. That's what I miss. We had a fabulous teacher for 1 year, and he instilled such a love of the Red Branch Knights, Fionn McCool, Tombo Coolna, and all of those, and the Annals of the Four Masters, and all of that. That when we went into the next year into class, there was no mention of to carry on that link, that thread, to engender that. So we were left to our own devices. But I never forgot it. I know it's only a year, but is there much of that in school today?
No.
That information, that knowledge of our mythological heroes,
no,
so to speak.
No, is the answer. No, I taught in a private secondary school 2013 and 14, and nowhere near the curriculum, but I tried to bring it into history class. I tried to introduce it and to teach it to some extent, but it's not on the curriculum, no. They don't seem to want children to know about that anymore.
Do you think, I have three, well, they're gone now, they're grown up and gone, three children, but do you think that education is utterly geared to passing exams?
I do. That's why I left the secondary school system. Even when I was trying to bring in creative approaches to learning, and I was assigning more creative writing projects, the kids themselves were going, no, but this isn't on our curriculum. So I just thought there's really no point in me doing this, because I'm not interested. I'm interested in activating somebody's creativity.
Right.
That's where we come to know ourselves. So that's not happening in school.
And is the problem with education, because I see it as a problem myself, and I often thought, am I the only person out of step? Is the problem going back to where the teachers are trained to be teachers, if you follow my drift?
Yeah. It depends on the individual and how they view their role as a teacher. I mean, we can't all have dead poet societies with Robin Williams teaching us English.
Oh, wasn't that fantastic?
Isn't that the way you'd want it to be? And of course,
that's the way it should be.
That's the way it should be. Absolutely.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. And what a wonderful soul Robin Williams was,
and gosh, I love the man. I just love the man as a human being.
Amazing. Absolutely. I mean, when you see his face, you just see so many emotions in just one, even
I know. He was superb. Whatever he did, whether it was Nanu with Mark from Ark.
No, I know. I was just thinking that's the first time I would have seen him as a child. Nanu, I just loved it.
So yeah, looking back now, it was just fantastic. Siofra O'Donovan is our special guest here on LíRmedia.tv. By the way, her book, which is up in the background, let me see, Yours Till Hell Freezes. It's in all good bookshops, and just in case you like some of the people who have to wear these face nappies, don't be afraid, you can buy it online as well. It's around 20 quid or something like that. And it's in all good bookshops. As I said, it's in here in O'Mahony's in Limerick, where I got my copy. So there you go, Siofra. Now getting back to Kevin.
Yeah.
If you want to speak a bit about his last few hours on Earth was, what jumped out of the book to me was the first time when he was in court, when he didn't recognize the court.
Yeah.
But I heard a relation, some relation. God, my mind has gone a bit to so long ago in the early radio era. And there's a relation of a priest, the priest that attended to him.
Oh yes, well that's interesting because I came across some really interesting material relating to his last hours, and there was a priest. There were several priests involved.
Yeah.
Another aspect of Kevin Barry was that he actually was very spiritual. He was very religious. Um, he had an awful lot of prayers being said, and he said an awful lot of prayers before he went into the gallows. Now, one document that I found was a witness statement by a man called Father Lawrence. And Father Lawrence was the priest on Clarendon Street where the Barrys all went to church.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he wrote a witness statement for the Bureau of Military History. And he wrote in that about Canon Waters, who was the priest in Mountjoy, who was with Kevin right up to the end. So he then had written about Canon Waters, describing to him those last hours. So what happened was Kevin and Canon Waters were together, and there was a little altar set up, and Kevin was saying prayers with Canon Waters.
Right.
And then in comes this very tall, well-dressed man. And Canon Waters thought, well, this must be the doctor. And kind of almost sophisticated looking man. And then he saw he took Kevin's wrists and he was measuring them for the pinions. So he knew.
Ellis, yeah.
They knew it was Ellis. They knew that it was John Ellis. Now, John Ellis was, he had arrived, the ropes had arrived maybe a few days before. Ellis was a renowned executioner, and he had worked a lot with Pierrepoint, who was a very well-known executioner, hangman.
Well, he became an advocate against capital punishment, Albert Pierrepoint, late in his life, as you know.
Yeah, I think he just saw the horrors of it. And John Ellis, a number of years after he hanged Kevin, there was a botched hanging of a woman. I'm not sure, was it in Manchester or somewhere, but he actually was traumatized by that, and he then hanged himself, I think, or killed himself.
He did, yeah. He did.
Sad ending. But, apparently I found documents relating to this as well, that after he hanged, Kevin, he went on to hang the other 9 young men who were then exhumed, as we know, in 2001.
That's right.
He was giving out about how stressful the job was, and could he not have a pay rise after he executed Kevin. So that was very ironic.
It's a rather unusual occupation, so to speak.
He did hairdressing as well. I think it was in Wales. He had a little hairdressing shop.
I thought hanging was an abhorrent way to execute someone.
Yeah.
Executions as they go. I think shooting someone, the firing squad, was far more noble.
It was, and then
you can describe it as death being noble, then that to me would be a noble death.
Yeah, and that's what Kevin said. Can they not shoot me like a soldier?
Yes.
Like a dog.
It wasn't
but
to be.
He certainly went in those last moments, and those last that he smoked a cigarette apparently as well, and that very cigarette butt is in Carlow Museum.
Really?
Yeah.
See that? I don't see that sometimes.
I mean, they did what they had, they had to do. They put the white cloth over his head, and it's really, he went to his death while Canon Waters was saying the prayers, and then it happened, and then straight away Dr. Hackett came up, the prison doctor came up and made his analysis and took his medical report, and that was the end. That was the end.
Is there a copy of that death certificate there at all?
Yes, there is a copy of the death certificate. I actually just gave a copy to Carlow Museum.
Yeah.
We had, yeah.
Did it say death by hanging, was it?
Did it say death by hanging? I can't remember now.
I can't. I saw a copy one time, but I can't remember myself.
Yes.
Now, after Kevin was killed and the event was over, obviously.
Yeah.
How did the family? I can't even ask the question because I'm just thinking myself in my own case. It was my son. how did they manage living after and business wise and all of that?
Well, it looks like they kind of threw themselves into, they were really in the thick of the war then, you see.
Yeah.
And they seemed to just have to throw themselves into that. Kitby, his older sister, had held back from joining Cumann na Món. She joined it then in 1920 after his execution. His brother Michael Barry was already in the C Company of the IRA down in Carlow. He was then arrested in December 1920, and he spent a year or two over in Lincoln prison. His sister, his younger sister, Elgin Barry, then she went on to become very active in Cumann na Món, and she did a hunger strike in the North Dublin Union
Right.
in the Civil War as well.
Yes.
So
When
they
the
were
Civil War came, Siofra,
sorry?
when the Civil War came,
Yeah.
after the treaty being signed and all of that, of course, that'd be enough for an extra program. But when the Civil War came, what side did the family line up on? That's
Well, they
Kevin.
were absolutely adamantly anti-treaty in the Barry family. But ironically, Kitby Barry, she kept up a friendship with Michael Collins, who had been so upset. He cried all of the night before Kevin's execution. He had tried very hard to get a successful rescue mission going. Nothing worked.
Oh,
and he was brokenhearted over Kevin Barry. And Kitby, Kevin's older sister, and Michael Collins seemed to have a very special connection. And despite being on either side of the Civil War thing, Kitby said as soon as she heard Michael Collins had been shot, she cried buckets.
yes, because I mean, there's admiration of people of principle. Whether
Yeah.
you're misguided or not is something for historians. But you know, like Michael Collins, because he was only 28. People forget that he's only 28 years of age when Kevin was killed. You know.
Yeah.
And so they were young men. They were all young men. Was some very
Yeah.
young men in their prime. You know.
Yeah.
And so they were, as you would say, Siofra, they were anti-treaty. You know.
Yeah, they were. And then they had trouble with De Valera later on when De Valera did these, he banned the IRA and everything, and he did some executions of George Plant and everything in Portlaoise prison, and the Barrys turned against him completely then. It was a very bad feeling. In 1953, Mrs. Barry passed away, and De Valera came to the funeral, and he was Taoiseach, and they ignored him.
He was in 1953. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, the Barry family collectively ignored him, which is quite extraordinary, really. But anyway, time went on, and then my grandfather, who was very extreme in his views and ideology and his everything, Jim O'Donovan, he never forgave De Valera. Now the Barrys did, I think, later, and I know that by 1970, when there was a commemoration, the 50-year anniversary for Kevin, Elgin Barry made a point of going up to De Valera, at that point. At some point you have to let go of these things. But my grandfather, oh no, he never would. My father went to see De Valera Norris and Root Drawn in 1970, and he said, De Valera said to him, would you please ask your father if he has any bitterness towards me? Would he forgive me, and that I've forgiven him, and can we move on? And my father said, of course. And he very much wanted to heal that wound that had been in the family for a long time. And he went to his father in the nursing home in Dalkey, and my grandfather wouldn't talk to him for 4 days.
I heard, of course, the Civil War, even to this day in parts of the country,
yeah,
you cannot bring it up.
No.
With certain families, even within families. In my mother's mother, that's my grandmother on my mother's side, she had little bits of snippets before she died. I remember she died in 1960, 65 or 66 anyway, but very little would they partake of any information, and you're becoming aware of your history that time. You'd love to sit down around the fire and let it all out, but no, it was never spoken about. And as I said, my mum, the MacMahonas were related to Tomas McCurtain.
Yeah.
Of Cork, so there's that history as well. So it's fascinating. We don't hear it in history class anymore. We don't hear about the Civil War going to school.
No,
We're not
and you certainly won't see commemorate it. I mean, why would we commemorate it? You know, it's very painful. You know,
it should be marked something.
It certainly needs to be discussed. I mean, it's appalling, really, that this year there's been absolutely nothing really to commemorate anything.
Well, I think that COVID is a cover for the government to do nothing.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
could be doing plenty to mark this momentous year, you know.
Yeah, but it's the kind of government that would do that. And this government, we have to remember, they weren't voted in. It was some kind of, as far as I'm concerned, it was a hung doll, and they were some kind of coup d'etat that went on thanks to COVID. I have no time for this government, and I have no time for their policies. I'd probably lose a lot of friends now by saying that, but.
Well, you won't lose a lot of friends because, I mean, they're proving every second day their incompetence, and I didn't really think that they were out of touch as much as they are proving to be.
That's all. They have massive salaries, and they keep raising those salaries, and they keep their dole bar open. Well, you know, all of it is a contradiction. All of it.
It's madness, as we were saying on the phone call. On the phone, you can go into the multiples, and you won't get zapped with the virus, but you can't go into your local shop. Yeah. It's closed.
Yeah.
It's nuts, completely nuts. I said we said we wouldn't mention COVID, but how you find it, Siofra? Did I see a photograph of yourself and Eamon O'Keefe?
That's right, yeah. Eamon is the grandson of De Valera. So
I know who he is, the fecker.
So we did have a good. He had a great talk there at the book launch, and we felt that we healed some of the wounds in the story of the De Valera and the antagonism towards De Valera in the book. I bring that through in the narrative of the book, because my father felt strongly that there should be a resolution to that. He could never find a resolution to that with his father, who was very extreme and very bitter. It was sad, you know, but certainly my father did his best to make friends with De Valera after, you know, everything, you know.
Yeah. And do you think he was reconciled?
My father certainly was. He always wanted to move in. He was very pragmatic. He wanted Ireland to be in the EU, and he was part of some committee for that. He certainly was more pragmatic than his own father. But my own grandfather is a whole other story. Like, he brought in Albert.
Is there a book there on your grandfather?
Yeah, written by David O'Donovan. It's a very interesting book, very difficult for any family member to read because Granddad was so extreme. But he did bring in a number of
How do you mean he was so extreme?
He brought in these spies. You see, he was active right into the 30s and the 40s.
Yeah.
So he was interned in the Curragh for his part in bringing in these Nazi spies into Ireland, and one of them was in, you know, my dad's orchard when he was 12 years old, and gave my dad his rifle and his gun. And I think because my dad felt his own father was so absent as a father, he had some kind of funny bond with this soldier or this spy.
Right.
My own father became a spy later for the East Germans. It's all very strange, but anyway.
Your own, whose father?
He was a spy for the East Germans in the 60s.
Who was that?
My father.
There's a book there, is there?
He wrote about it in his own memoirs, but yeah, there's another book, about Dad.
Goodness me,
I'm just on way to India.
I'm just trying to take that in and trying to formulate another question, Siofra. What about yourself? Are you a Republican?
No, I don't think I am. You know, it's strange, but I mean, I've always had this enormous admiration for Kevin Barry and for what he did for this country, the courage that he had and everything. But myself, I'm somebody who's much more of a person of the world and more of a global citizen than I don't even really want to live in Ireland for the rest of my life. I'd rather live in a warmer country. I'm not actually that patriotic. It might surprise everybody, but you know, Irish politics are very sticky and very difficult. They don't move on easily. You know, once my son is grown up, you know, we might move off somewhere more interesting. Well, Ireland isn't fascinating, but.
And you're living in County Wicklow, so you were voting in the last election. I'm not going to ask you who you voted for. but you were voting in the last election in the constituency of County Wicklow.
That's right.
And how did you find the choice of candidates that you were faced with?
Well, not so great, really. I think it's getting worse and worse. I'll tell you who I admire most at the moment. The one who I admire most, the one who I wish was the leader of this country. Wait till you hear this now. Michael McNamara.
Well, he's a fellow Clareman.
He's wonderful. I love everything that he says is what I feel about.
Well, Michael McNamara, as you know, he was in the Labour Party and he got elected for the Labour Party first time round, and then he lost his seat. But this time around, he went as an independent. And I was always living in County Clare. I always had him penciled in for one. There's only 4 seats in County Clare. Of course, De Valera was a TD for County Clare, as you know.
Oh, indeed, yeah.
Back in the old days.
Yeah.
And but Michael, I knew he'd get a seat. And of course, they bought with Sinn Féin, with the wind behind Sinn Féin, they got a seat in County Clare.
Yeah.
From nowhere.
Yes, I know.
Nowhere. Nobody had factored in. Although when I went around with local people, and there was a huge vibe for Sinn Féin at the doors.
But I think that will remain, and it might get even more strong, I think, into the next election.
Do you think so?
Yeah. Well, I hope. Well, I'm not saying I hope.
No, it's all right. I didn't hear it at all, Siofra. Anyway, I'll tell you.
I think Sinn Féin are the ideal party, but we have to break the hegemony of FFFG.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
Jeez, I thought I'd have seen it by now, but I'm faster running out of time myself.
Eamon Quiv was the nicest Fianna Fáil, member that I've ever met, and very measured and very clear, and he is a true Republican in the pure sense of the word.
Eamon O'Keefe, I've been to of his talks, one time, and I was surprised that he never became leader of Fianna Fáil.
Yeah, I know. You know that when I was a child, my dad was Fianna Fáil and he used to drag me around canvassing for Charlie High.
Go away.
Swear to God.
He had good taste.
But then he went off them with Bertie and the guys, big gangsters. So he went off the whole thing. Really went off them. Big time. And then at the end of his days, my father died in 2009. I remember him dragging me down to the Royal Hotel in Bray for a socialist meeting. He was trying everything in the end.
Fair play to him. He was searching for meaning in politics, which is Siofra, it's been an absolute pleasure and a blast for us here on LíR Media. And we'll catch up with you again. But before we go, friends, let me hold it up properly. The book, here it is. It's in all good bookshops. Yours Till Hell Freezes, which Kevin wrote at the end of some of his letters. Is that right? And that's his signature, I presume, on the bottom of the book.
Yeah, no, it's not his signature, but it's just the beautiful design that Curragh Books are the publisher.
Curragh, yeah.
Job of design. There's some amazing photographs by Lisa McNamara, who's
there is, yeah, in the middle, which it is just fantastic. And I'm looking forward now to read it, and I'll be able to quiz you better the next time on all the stuff you have inside the covers. And don't forget, listeners and viewers, to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And Siofra, as I said, thank you once again for taking time out of your very busy schedule. And then from this edition of LíR Confidential and LíR Media, for myself, Pat Barry, good night and good luck.
Thank you.
Siofra.